Just press record. And I'm gonna edit this like later, so it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so we kind of already started chatting, but I guess for like the podcast, can you just introduce yourself like just really quick to whoever's listening or will listen?
Yeah. I'm Richelle Machado. I'm a graduating master's forensic psychology student at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology in Los Angeles. My degree will be in master's forensic psychology with a concentration in police psychology. I thoroughly enjoy working with a diverse people. I have two sites that I currently work at, Mariposa in Orange, and then I work at Hope House in Anaheim, both California, obviously. Um, so Hope House, I work with, it's a residential treatment facility, and I work with all males 18 plus who are either probation or parole or self-admitted. For treatment, the main is substance abuse. And then at Mariposa, it's a women's and family center. So I get kids, adults, teens, children. It just depends. So, but yeah, a wide variety.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like yeah, like your caseload is really diverse, right? Like male, female, kids.
Yeah, it definitely is. Part of like why I chose forensic psychology is because like it's very interesting, especially to work with the criminally ill offender. Um, you always find the underlying cause, right? And that really helps work into other dynamics for like private practice, like Mariposa, where you have like even more diverse clientele.
Yeah. For your degree, is that a PsyD or what is it?
No, it's a master's, and
Oh, it's a
then
master's. Okay.
yeah, and I'm currently applying to my same school, Chicago School's doctoral program
Oh,
in
okay.
forensic psychology. So,
Oh, cool.
mm,
Yeah, because I have some friends that went to that school for their, I guess, doctorate, or I really don't know if the doctorate and the PsyD is the same thing, but they went there for school. So I was
yeah,
like, okay.
yeah. The For the doctoral degrees in psychology, it would be either a PsyD or PhD.
Okay.
PhD is like more research based, and then PsyD is more clinical counseling based, or testing.
Mhm. Oh, okay. I see. Well,
Mhm.
exciting.
Yeah.
So, okay. So today we're going to be talking about, I guess, codependency in relationships.
Okay.
And I chose this topic because I don't know, like, I just think it's important because a lot of the times I feel like people don't realize when they're in a codependent relationship. Like, you're just kind of in it. And it's not until afterwards, like, not, well, at least for me, like, just looking back is like when you start realizing, like, what was going on or whatever. And so, yeah, I guess we could start with like what comes to mind when you hear the word codependency, just so people could understand kind of like what it is in case someone doesn't know.
Yeah.
They're like, what the heck does that even mean? Like, what is codependency? So, how would you help explain that?
So codependency is it's almost like a reliance on someone else to meet all of your needs. And when we think of it kind of in that way, it's like to be more realistic, our partners can't really give us every single need that we need or desire. Um, that kind of leads us to failure, right? So a lot of times it's these types of people or personalities that don't like to go out by themselves,
Mhm.
right? Don't like to take themselves out to dinner, feel like they have to travel with someone, feel like their partner needs to provide them with every single need, emotional, physical, psychological, um, even spiritual, right? And it could be your friend, it can be a family member, right? It can be like an enabling relationship with a parent. It takes a variety of forms.
I'm so glad you said that, because when I was doing like a little bit of research, like just to refresh in my mind, I guess you could say, I found that like it said, codependence in relationship isn't just like in romantic relationships, like with your partner. Like it could happen with family, like you said, or like friends and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, because when I heard like codependency, like immediately I just think like with your partner or whatever. But yeah, like it could happen with different relationships.
Yeah, I mean it like family systems, right?
Uh,
It usually stems from your parents. So if they have a codependent personality type, and they haven't dealt with their trauma or whatever they haven't dealt with, that has happened to them, it can lead to codependency, right? I don't want to do anything by myself. A lot of times our boomer and what silent generation parents and grandparents, like it was survival mode. So like you can't really be by yourself because it's a lot harder to survive. I mean, I'm not saying like today is not hard to survive because this economy is
yeah.
very difficult. But yeah, it stems from that. And like when we finally figure it out, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to work on myself? Because realistically, we can't rely on someone else to meet every single need that we have.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Good. I mean, yeah, when you brought up like the family part of it, um, yeah, I think for sure, like I agree with that, because I feel like with me, in the relationship kind of part of it, like it kind of felt like, culturally, like, you have to be with your partner, you have to do stuff for your partner. I mean, as a woman. And so, yeah, that played a lot for sure.
Yeah, that's hard too. Like I grew up with the same thing. I was taught to serve my father and
Mhm.
my grandfather, right? The men get served first. You spend hours in the kitchen, cooking. But you grow older, and that is a very archaic, patriarchal way, um, because they put men on a pedestal, right? So it can lead to like, yes, you don't feel comfortable doing things on your own because it's like you always had to ask for permission.
Yeah. And yeah, that sucks. Like, I don't like asking for permission. So that's,
Nobody does. Yeah, I mean, unless you're a
yeah.
child, right? You need to listen to your parents or guardian, right? But yeah, it's nobody wants to feel like they're constricted, right?
So, codependency, just from like some of the research, because I like to give an official stuff from like stuff that I read.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I don't
Like
know, I just feel weird. Like if I say something, even though like I went to school for this stuff and you learn about it, I just feel weird like just saying it. And people are just gonna be like, what? Like, okay. So I always like to do a little bit of research before and then just talk about it. So codependency, also known as like, it could also be known as relationship addiction or a toxic relationship. I think that's the term nowadays. And it usually involves one person who is the taker and one person who is the giver. And so the taker, I was reading a lot of stuff for the taker. I mean, it said like these people tend to have like low self-esteem too, and they need to feel like they're being taken care of.
yeah.
And the taker, puts their own needs kind of off to the side. And so obviously, like they focus on the needs of others. And that has to do a lot of like with validation, I feel, because when you do something for other people, you feel like you're I don't know, like you're kind of helping. So you kind of feel good, I guess, in the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, a taker and a giver for sure. And yeah. Okay. So just going back to what we were talking about. So culturally, like I said, like it was weird because like with me, I grew up with like a single mom. And so it was kind of like the opposite. Like for me, like never wanted to get married. Like that wasn't never like the goal of things. And my mom always like taught us to be very independent. And so when I got into this first like very serious relationship, I feel like I was still like I guess like looking back, like I was still a kid because I was only like I met him when I was 16 and then got married when I was 19. So I was still a kid. And so at that time, like you do a lot of impulsive stuff when you're younger. And to me, like that serious relationship and like getting married was an impulsive thing. Like it was something that I didn't even think about and I just kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about it that way, right, our experiences,
Yeah.
it's the hyper independence, right, that comes in.
Uh-huh.
Like I can do everything by myself, right? Like I don't need anybody, but also it's what biological are uh what did you say? The when you do blanking when you do something really fast without thinking about it.
Impulsive.
Oh, there you go. Sometimes things come in and out, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about impulsivity, right, and biology, it's the prefrontal cortex, right? It's not developed yet until you're, I think, 22, 23, something around mid 20s, right? Around that age. So from 16 to 19, it's very increased impulsivity that we have, right? We live based off our emotions, right? And love is another a major emotion that we feel and have. But when we develop codependency, right, in your situation, right, it's a lot harder to navigate that because for one, you had two really distinct sides of the spectrum, like the hyper independence and then the cultural aspect of the should,
I know.
right? The should like cater to your man per se.
Yes. True, true, true. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I feel like I was still growing and he was older than me too. So in a way, like I don't know. I don't know. It's just weird because there's like so much that plays into it. But he was older, so I guess it was just kind of like just thought like he knew best
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah.
I don't know. Like, what has your experience been with in your own life with this, with codependency?
Yeah, so I had like I mean, I'm Mexican, so you know the upbringing in that aspect, right? It's you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, especially as the eldest daughter.
Mhm.
I'm the eldest daughter, the eldest granddaughter. Um, yeah, it's hard. You have a lot of pressure on you. They may not think about that pressure, right? Because they're so enthralled in their own stuff that's going on. I didn't have a great childhood. It was very abusive. Looking back, it's like it's survival mode, right? So I was the same, brought up like serve the dad, what dad knows is best, right? But as you grow older, for him, his mental illness just kind of declined. Um, so it's hard to think of it that way. So when I get into relationships, when I used to get into relationships before, it was for me the position of like the catering to his needs, right? So I think for me, I guess I was the taker. Like I felt like I have to um give everything to them in the relationship. It's like almost like I felt I had to carry it by myself,
Mhm.
right? So it's like the hyper independence and then additional codependency because I was the same way. I was like, I was able to, when the economy was better,
Mhm.
I was able to live on my own, right? Full-time job and go and do whatever I wanted to, right? So hyper independence for that aspect. I mean, a lot of people would be like, no, that's just being independent. Well, it's different when you did not have the privileges other people had, right? It's different.
Mhm.
So the hyper independence and then codependency for me in relationships was the same thing. It was when the two men that I dated long term, it was kind of following their role and doing kind of what they said in the relationship, well, not to do what to do, right? Sometimes it was like, don't dress like that. Let's do this instead of that, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so it's difficult to find a balance, but like looking back now, it's like I'm now definitely a totally different person. um I know, like, it's like you increase your self-esteem, you increase your self-worth, right? You realize that you can do things by yourself, and I've always felt like, at least in my 20s and especially now my 30s, I feel so much more comfortable doing things by myself, taking myself on a date, like for dinner. I haven't been to a movie theater though.
By yourself.
No, I have, but like
Oh, okay.
not recently. I
Mhm.
would say at least 5 years. I have not. I mean, we all know the past, what, 2.5 years almost now. It's because of COVID.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've taken myself to the movies, right? I'll take my dog to the park on a walk. Like, that's really relaxing. Things that you find for self care is what actually helps decrease that codependency, right?
Mhm. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, just I had kind of like the same experiences. Um, because I feel like with Emma's dad, because that's my daughter's dad. With Emma's dad, like his family was the one that was very like, oh, like, you have to take care of him, blah, blah, blah. And so that just kind of happened. And I think I didn't realize it was like a codependent relationship until after when we broke up, because like when we broke up, it kind of just felt like I don't know, like it felt like, what am I gonna do with my life now? Because you just become like a part of that person.
Destructive. You sound like it's like you become emotionally destructive. You shut down all your emotions, or else it's like the opposite. It's like you feel too much.
Mhm. Yeah, I felt like all that time, like I had just not done anything for myself, and like I kind of like isolated myself from my friends and stuff, and that I don't know, to me, like that's kind of part of the codependency. It's just like not taking care of yourself, but just the other person. So that's when I first started realizing that um like it's just so crazy how you could just get like so into the relationship where you're not taking care of yourself. And like you said, like it is important, like even if you are in a relationship, to do stuff for yourself and do stuff by yourself, like your own activities. Like it doesn't have to be everything. Um, everything doesn't have to be done together, right? With the other person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, codependency, it's part, if you don't deal with it right, you just kind of continue, you start to lose your identity, right? And then all of a sudden you're just a mom. You're just a wife. You're just a whatever, right? In that aspect, right? But we know that we as humans are more than our societal titles,
Mhm.
right? There's many things that are other than that are about us and about our personalities. But yeah, we lose a sense of identity, right? Because we're always putting others first. We're always doing everything for everyone else. And then at that point, it's like, when do you have time for yourself? When do you have time to kind of process and reflect about who you are, what you want out of life, and your beliefs?
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Um, and just going back as far as like, well, the whole codependency thing where there's a giver and a taker. So like the taker who will make the other person feel guilty, like if they don't do something for them or whatever. And then the giver who just puts their own feelings off to the side for the other person. So
Oh,
I thought
so
it.
then I think I'm the giver then. I was the giver, not the taker. It was always it was definitely always my partner
Giving.
that was the taker. I was definitely like giving my all and trying to figure out like, because I mean, we've all been there in relationships that were like, okay, I want to do everything that I can
Mhm.
so I can clear my own conscience selfishly, right? But it does in relationships and partnerships. It's like, if I love this person, I'm going to try to help them or figure something out. But like, if you, they're not going to change unless they want to, right? They're not going to do anything unless they want to. So you can suggest, you can imply, you can beg and plead if you so choose, but
Mhm.
can't change someone. You can't change someone if they're not willing to change.
Yeah. Yeah. So going off that, I thought it was, I think it's interesting that you can actually be both the taker and the giver. Like you could switch off like back and forth between the two.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because I could see that in myself now. Like with my current relationship, I feel like my partner's like super codependent. And that's something that I've always like tried to work on with him. Like, oh, you should hang out with your friends, like, do stuff, whatever. And so I think that also helped me realize like how what codependency is and how a person, could be really codependent. But
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I feel like my current partner is. And then I'm also like the type of person that can, I don't want to say can be toxic, but like
We're all little Toxica
yeah.
sometimes.
And that's something I'm working on, but that's just like I think also like a personality thing where I like to like push people's buttons sometimes and be an asshole. But that's just
That's how we were raised, though. It's
like when you have like a best friend and you pick on them, but that's like how you show like your love. And I know that's like you see that's a little toxic, but
yeah,
yeah, that kind of thing.
yeah. I was like, yeah. It can't. Yeah, it's a little toxic, but it's like it's better that we recognize that, right? But if you have a friendship like that and it's working for you, what's to say it's bad or toxic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause
So
they're, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we all like kind of joke, especially with family members. Yeah, at times it's like you always have like the joker that called you out
Mhm.
on your shit. Um, it's funny, but sometimes it's like, okay, they're the one that's calling you out on your shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like you could be both, or you could like, because in my last relationship, for sure, I was the giver, like codependent. And then this relationship, it's like the opposite, but I'm not like an asshole where I'm like, you know, um, but yeah, I thought that was interesting for sure.
Yeah, I definitely was. I mean, what is that? The taker on the end because like I didn't want to lose the relationship, right? I had a lot invested. It's that whole like I've done all this for you, you should stay with me. Like you've done so much shit, blah blah blah, whatever it was. So you stay in the relationship until they are the ones that are like, okay, I'm gonna leave now. Like I don't want to do this anymore. Um, but that's part of the codependency. It's like the giver part, like I'm gonna do everything that I can think of
Mhm.
right? But if they're not willing to do the work and change, then they'll leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I read this when I was doing my research. So, a major sign of codependency is when you feel like you have to take care of everyone all the time. This typically comes from childhood when the caretaker learns that there may be terrible consequences from failing to take care of a parent's needs. And as a result, may feel compelled to take care of others, especially in a partner. So I think that's something we talked about, like how upbringing and everything.
Yeah, yeah. I always like to I mean, okay, so for my doctoral degree, my idea for a thesis is the intergenerational trauma, right?
Mhm.
When we think of it that way in codependency, survival mode, right? Doing things and the history of women's rights, right?
Mhm.
My mom, she's gonna be 62. Yeah, she's gonna be 62. So she's lived through quite a few women's rights issues, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think the last one of the last ones, not last ones, there was a lot more after that, but the it was now legal to for women to have their own bank account, right? So I think my mom was she was a teenager. I think she was maybe 16 or something like that. Um, yeah, 16 or something like that. And then she had an older sister and a younger sister, right? So when you look at it that way, it's like you still had to depend
Mhm.
on a man, right? And it had to be a man because back then it's like as a queer person or a gay person,
Mhm.
forget it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, what does we kind of talked about what codependency looks like a little bit? Some signs of codependency in relationships, people pleasing. People pleasers often feel like they have no choice but to keep others happy. They don't like to say no, even when pleasing others interferes with their own wants and needs. So I've seen that for sure. Yeah, like for sure. Like for example, in a relationship, like where you never get to do what you want to do, maybe like just always doing what the other person wants to do.
Yeah, that's frustrating. That's so frustrating. I I remember one Valentine's Day. I don't celebrate really Valentine's Day anymore for one. I don't have a partner to celebrate it. Um, but I used to like for me it was like a celebration of love, right? We know it was like invented and whatnot, but for the end result, it's like a celebration of love, right? And when we think of it that way, it doesn't have to be like monetarial, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to. You don't have to spend money. It could be like words of affirmation, right? It
Yeah.
could be quality time, right? It could be whatever love language they have within your means, right? To live
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I don't celebrate Valentine's Day either anymore.
in.
I'm like, no. Um, Another sign of codependency in relationships, lack of boundaries. People in both roles in codependent relationships tend to have problems recognizing, respecting, and reinforcing boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The past decade I've been working more on boundary setting, right? And then with the codependency, it's like you feel like you can't ask for help or you shouldn't because of the hyper independence that you were taught. So with that, it leads into your academics and your work, right? So with those, if they decline, it's like then it leads to financial situations and issues. It all just connects with one another.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I didn't, yeah, like I didn't even know what boundaries were back in the day.
Oh, I know. Yeah, well, because you're not taught like
Yeah.
it's the okay. So the simplest factor is mom tells you go kiss and hug grandma. Well, if you're autistic or you're emotionally distant and don't feel comfortable, whatever it may be, right? You don't feel comfortable doing that, right? You don't consent to it. Boundaries comes towards okay, I'm gonna it's allowing the consent, right? Can I consent? Can I not consent, right? But as kids, when we're taught like, no, you have to do what I say, not as I do, right? Your feelings aren't valid. You don't matter. You have to do what I say, right?
Yeah.
So it leads into the relationships of, oh, I have to do what my man says, or I have to do what
Mhm.
my partner says, but in academics it's like, oh, I have to figure hyper independence, right? I have to figure things out on my own, right? And then even if I fail, right, I still try to figure things out on my own, right? So because I failed before too, everybody has failed, like that's how you learn more, right? um but yeah, it's a struggle because like asking for help when you're codependent and are still working on your boundaries is hard, right? And that's the need for validation, right? So I always tell my supervisors that I'm like, I need so much feedback, right? Even if it's good or bad, right? And she has been so lovely about providing that for me, especially I was like, your notes, you have to do your notes, right? It's the wording, the verbiage, the content.
Yeah.
So I overthink, right? And need for validation. Is this good enough? Is this good enough? Is this good enough? Um, but and when you have like coworkers and supervisors and family that can really respect that and work on it with you and respect you in that way and allow you to have those boundaries, there can be healing from that, right? But if not, you're stuck and you have to figure out, do I need to distance myself? Do I need to leave? Or what
Mhm.
do I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way you explained it because that's the thing with like sometimes like I don't know how to verbalize what I'm thinking, so I liked how you explained it with the upbringing and stuff because it is true. Like you grow up, with your parent telling you what to do and you have to do it, otherwise you'll get in trouble. And so yeah, like as you get older, like you learn to just not question anything, to not speak up for yourself and not set any boundaries.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. That's something that I had to learn too, like just growing up, like your opinion matters. Like like you could speak up.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, because we grow up with but of the needing, we want the needing to be needed, right? Um but like to what to say to well, to reduce the codependent tendencies,
Mhm.
right? To heal from it, right? It's the self-love, self-care, right? So being your own fan club, right?
Mhm.
Speak highly of yourself in a loving, positive way, and then resist impulses to self criticize. This can also be like weight issues, body issues, right? Or academic issues. I'm not good enough. It can lead into self sabotage. Um,
Oh gosh, I self sabotage a lot. So yeah,
yeah, I have big imposter syndrome. I mean,
both. Yes, me too.
yeah, I think that codependency leads to that as well. It's like, am I good enough? Right? Am I
Oh
doing what the right thing? Right? Am I a good therapist? Right? Am I
yes,
helping people or am I hurting people? Right? Because it's
yeah.
the whole code, right? The main code is do no harm.
Mhm. Yeah, like even though you're obviously like educated and like you go to school for whatever you go to school for, yeah, like
All
at
the
the,
experiences in your life.
You're just like, do I really know what I'm talking about, or do I know? And it's like, yes, like you do, but yeah, for sure. And the other thing that you had mentioned was the need for validation. So yeah, like just needing validation. And so you gave the example of like your notes, your supervisor, right? Do you think the opposite could happen, like to a person that's codependent, where they just don't even like care about validation? Like they're just, I don't know. Like, do you think the opposite could happen?
A lot of times those who have codependent tendencies get into relationships with partners with narcissistic tendencies. So it's like the alpha male, right?
Mhm.
That you look for because you're so comfortable and used to serving others and they know everything, right? And so when you look for someone, it's like, oh, I need to have someone that's everything, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting just to like learn about all of this. And
Yeah.
okay, so let's see what other points. Oh, I thought this was a good point too. So let me read it to you. As another sign of codependency, or what it could look like, reactivity. When your identity is based on pleasing others and you feel responsible for everyone's well-being, you might find yourself reacting to situations rather than acting out of your own volition. I don't know that word.
Yeah.
You might find yourself being defensive or easily internalizing criticism. This results in losing touch with your own wants and needs.
Yeah.
I think that has to do with the boundary setting, huh? Like
It does
you don't set boundaries. And so there's only so much you can hold in before you
explode,
explode in certain situations. And
especially if you don't know how to control those what intense emotions, especially anger. It's okay to feel anger. It's an emotion. Like you are valid in feeling your feelings, but it's our responses to those feelings that we need to control. That's the only thing that we can control. We can't control how we feel, but we can control their response to how we feel, right?
mhm, yes. And okay, I just have two more points on that. Poor communication. A codependent mindset makes it hard to communicate. The caregiver is often unaware of his or her own wants and needs. And when they are aware of them, they're reluctant to express them because they feel like caring for the other person is the most important thing. So, yeah, we kind of talked about that with like not feeling like you could speak up and, yeah, taking care of the other person.
Yeah, yeah. To kind of reduce that and heal from it, it would look like standing up for yourself if
Mhm.
someone criticizes you or undermines you or tries to control you in any way, right?
Yeah. Last point that I wrote down, lack of self image. The caregiver may have low self esteem or may have not much of a self image at all. Often the caregiver defines his or herself or mainly in relation to the other person, and they may have no idea who they are without having that role to play. This is why the caregiver is also dependent, even though they're the ones taking care of the other person.
Yeah.
That is crazy because that's kind of what I was talking about. And that when I got out of the relationship, my serious relationship, how I was like, who am I? Um,
Yeah.
because you kind of just become like an extension of the other person
I
in
mean, yeah,
life.
that's kind of like the whole point of like a breakup sometimes after
Yeah.
who am I personally? What do I want? What do I think? what are my life goals? And you set out to achieve them, and you work on yourself, and you go from there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, some suggestions to help deal with codependency. You kind of like have already mentioned some, right? Like
Yeah.
setting boundaries, self-care, taking care of yourself. And I put talk to a therapist. That's always my solution to every topic though, because I mean, that's important. Like feel like with anything, like talk to a therapist if you can. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's like that, right? And like I said, learn to speak highly of yourself, right, in a loving, positive way. Don't be self-critical, right, especially about your body image and weight, and um, don't. It's like it's not don't. It's the imposter syndrome, right? The self-criticism. I'm not good enough, right? So if we reduce that, and then um, standing up for yourself, right? If someone criticizes you, or they try to uh, over overstep your boundaries, it's standing up for yourself, and then really not being afraid to say no to someone, especially like right now as a therapist. It's like setting up your schedule so you're not overwhelmed, right? A lot of therapists are like, I'm going to see 8 clients back
Oh
to
my
back.
gosh.
That's a lot. you
Yeah,
know
that's a lot.
right? I tend to do no more than, I really don't like to push 6, but I like to keep it at 4 or 5 if I can. And then maybe I'll do like a group, right? So I like to try to keep that, because like you have 8 hours in a day for, well, realistically, for work, and then you have notes to do,
Mhm.
right? So saying no when you don't have the time, and putting your mental health and self first.
Yeah, that's true. That's like, yeah, like that's something that I've been working on too, is just saying no to myself too. Because, yeah, like it's easy. Like if you're the type of person that, I don't even know how to describe it, but like if you're the type of person, like you said, like you like to be busy or you're always busy, like all the time. And I think that's kind of like self sabotage too. Like you're just kind of like making yourself so busy all the time. You have like a list of things. So yeah, just saying no to yourself too, for sure.
Of course.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I like all those suggestions. And that's it for today's episode. If there's any questions, you can always message me and I will give you whatever I have. I mean, really. But thank you so much, Richelle, for joining me. This was a really good conversation.
Yeah,
It really
I
was.
really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like very educational for sure. So, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.